You hear the advice of, you should write a short film, but you don't even really know what one is or why you should write one. And even if you decide to do it, what are some tips to write a good one? There's still a big question though, how do you actually write one? These are the things we're tackling today. Let's jump in. Before we begin, I have to admit, there are a lot of bad short films. Most short films are made by people learning the craft, to be candid. There's new writers, new directors, cinematographers, everybody's new, they're learning. And every once in a while, bad content is somehow made good. Most short films are actually, though, kind of bad. And there are different kinds of short films. Some are artistic or experimental or focused more on the visuals than the actual story. And while there's a place and a market for those, telling those kinds of stories generally don't transfer to writing in Hollywood. So we're going to focus on short films that actually have solid stories. There's also another grouping of short films, and that's what I'll call the wannabe films. These films are usually driven more by special effects and visual effects, and that the filmmakers are just really trying to learn a new technology or a new way of doing things. So they craft what they think is a story that's centered around some kind of pivotal visual or special effect. Typically, these are fan films where someone's just trying to learn how to VFX in a lightsaber or a superpower or something like that. Truthfully, some of these films are actually solid stories. Most, however, they're not. They're interesting premises, but nothing really actually happens. It's like, hey, there's this premise, some people fight, and then the short film ends, and we're kind of like, what just happened? So what is a short film? Well, most importantly, it's a complete story. It's still got to be a complete story. Someone who wants something badly, they're having trouble getting it, and they get it, or they don't. You got to have a complete story. It doesn't matter how long your story is. If it's a short film or a full feature or an epic series, it's still got to have the components of a story. Most importantly, a short film, it should have a complete story. Short films are usually in the 5 to 20 minute range for total runtime. Now they can be as short as a minute, as long as 30. Once you get more than 30, it tends to not really be considered a short film, although you can kind of get in there a little bit. Most, though, are in the 10 to 20 minute range, so 10 page to 20 page range if you're writing. The reason for this is that most film festivals that have short film categories specify the film must be between 10 and 20 minutes. Sometimes it's got to be 10 and 15 minutes or 15 to 20 minutes. It just depends on the festival. They're long enough, though, to see if you can sustain an actual story or if it's just a premise that's really just going to kind of fall apart after a few minutes. So they're long enough to demonstrate that you can actually tell a complete and coherent story. Short films might be a complete self-contained story, but they also might be a segment of a larger story or the setup for a larger story. Some short films are used as proof of concept, what's called proof of concept, to show that, hey, this can be shot, here's what it's going to look like, here's kind of the feel, here's the general vibe of the story, so it's kind of like a proof of concept. Now, this is not as common as it used to be. 20, 30 years ago, this was a big time thing, and people would do it, and it was really used as a calling card for directors. That still happens, but it's usually more in the independent film realm and not mainstream. Not always, but often. So that's what a short film is, but why would you write one? Why spend the time making one? Well, one, as I just noted, a good short film can get you noticed. And it shows that you know how to handle a story, and you might get to meet some people who want to know, hey, what else have you got? Then you go from there, and that's a good place to be in. Another reason why you'd write a short film is they're great at helping you learn economical writing. How do you tell a complete story in only this amount of space? It helps get you comfortable with the screenwriting form and terms and just how to handle a story in that shorter version. It can take months to write a solid feature spec, but if it's a 10-page short, it might only take you a week or two. So the time frame, what you can learn in writing a short, can be very helpful. Another reason you'd write a short is if you want something that you want to shoot yourself. Shorts are great at helping you learn the process of filmmaking and what's required and what isn't. You learn how long things take, what you need to include in the script, what you don't need to include in the script, and shooting something yourself helps you begin to more fully understand how your words on the page as a writer impact everyone down the line. And if you can tell a solid story in a short form, the odds are high that you can do it in a longer form. Now, it doesn't totally transfer because there's a lot more moving pieces. There's a lot more things that are happening, but you can learn the fundamentals pretty quickly if you can learn to master writing a short film. So what I want to do is I want to get us some tips of how to do it. Like, how do you write a short film, and what are some tips for writing a good one? Before I get into that, please interact in some way if you're finding value. Like, subscribe, comment below. If you've seen a really good short film, because they're sometimes hard to find, if you've seen one that you really like, drop a link below. Thank you for watching and interacting. I really do appreciate it. So let me go over a few tips here to help you write a better short film. The first thing you want to do is establish your status quo quickly. Every story, it doesn't matter what kind of story you're telling, every story has a status quo, and that status quo gets disrupted for the main character. So that's gonna happen. And then the character is now wrestling with, am I gonna do this thing or not? And then they make a decision and off we go, right? So you've got to establish the status quo quickly. What that really means is for a short, you've really got like 1 or 2 pages. Like, it's got to be tight. Your status quo, establish it, move on. Pacing is critical in short films, and you've got to learn to economically keep things moving while you're still getting in all the pieces that you need to tell a coherent and cohesive story. Another tip, and this one's going to kind of sound a little weird, but the end of good short films are usually not very tidy. So they don't tie off cleanly. Now, often there is an implication that there's more action to come, or there's more drama to come. There's something else going to happen, almost as if there could be a sequel, or like, hey, we're just watching this one little segment of this bigger piece, and it's implying some things are going to happen. So the end of a short film is not always tidy. In fact, the best shorts allow us to imagine what might happen. And what that does is that invites the audience to participate in the story. We remember the story more because we are crafting what might come next. We can imagine what we think's going to happen. So, we kind of figure that out. And as we're dreaming about that, we're now participating in the story. So having a tidy end doesn't really help with that. It's a short, so you want people to remember it. So one way you can do that is not have it so clean at the end. Now, mediocre shorts, they do imply some future action, but it's so vague that we can't possibly guess what might happen. Imagine a short story about someone who is whether they're going to be crowned king or queen or something like that. So you've got this person who is royalty, but they've been hidden, and they've got to choose, am I going to decide to do this thing or not? And the short film might end, we see them walking toward the castle, and it ends. Okay, it's not a tidy end, but we can imagine what's going to happen. They're walking in, they're probably going to say like, hey, I'm going to be the king, I'm going to be the queen, whatever it is, right? But there are others that the end is not tidy, but we have no idea what's going to happen. The person's sitting there and we don't see anything else. Like, what are they going to do? We don't know. And maybe we don't even know that they're royalty or descendant of royalty, and so we're just confused. So mediocre shorts can be good to a point, but if they don't fully imply or predict kind of what might happen, the audience is just kind of left confused, like, I don't know what's going on. There are a couple of caveats to this one though, because if you're writing a comedy, okay, the end usually wraps up neat and tidy, and there's usually a big laugh. You want a big laugh, you want to leave the audience just laughing, like gut laughing at the end, and roll credits. Like, that's what you want. And now they're laughing and like, oh, I saw this funny thing. Now they're participating in the story because they're telling other people about the funny part, but it's still wrapped up pretty neatly. Another exception happens if you are writing a story that is kind of a social commentary. Now, the end might not be entirely tidy. It might be. It's very clear what's going to happen. And the reason it's kind of left slightly hanging, even though we know exactly what the next scene is, whatever it is, it's going to give the audience something to chew on. So if you're commenting on some social issue, yeah, you want to leave just a little bit of mystery, but it's pretty much clear of what's going to happen, and the audience then starts to fill in the gaps and they start participating in it. Again, you want them to participate in the story. That helps them remember your short film. Another tip, you have just one main character. Yes, there are stories with multiple protagonists. If you start trying to list them though, you might come up with 10, maybe 10, that most of us would say, oh yeah, that's a really good story. Typically, multiple protagonist stories, they typically don't work. And they definitely don't work in short films. You have one main character, someone who wants something badly, they're having trouble getting it, they get it or they don't. One person. Now fight me on this if you want, but you only have 20 pages at most. Multiple protagonists simply are not gonna work. Your story's it's gonna be bad. I'm sorry, that's just what's gonna happen. Another tip, showing, not telling, is critical. Most good shorts don't really have much dialogue. Comedy and social commentary withstanding. Those tend to have more dialogue, or they're dialogue heavy. Other shorts, most of them just don't have a lot of dialogue. Telling a story visually is a more economical way of telling a story anyway. So lean into that. If you've written a short, a great thing to do is go back through every line of dialogue and figure out, is there a way I can show this instead of saying it, where I can eliminate the line of dialogue but yet still keep the story beat? And you want to try to do that as much as possible. Show, don't tell, very important. Another tip for your short story, for your short film, the story itself should be amped up. It should be extreme. I mean, you don't have much time to tell the story anyway, so you can't play it safe, you can't go slow. You got to get to the point, you got to get to the extreme. Now, this doesn't mean your story has to have violence or nudity or graphic language in it just to be graphic. That's not what I'm saying. In fact, the best shorts usually don't have those things. But you've got tension out the wazoo, stakes up the yin-yang, and with this, the stakes are critical. There has to be something valuable worth losing. It's not just one parent who's not going to talk to the child anymore. It's the child is going to get kicked out of the family forever and have to live on the streets in the worst part of town. Kind of bad. Amp it up. It's not just that someone might get fired. It's that they're going to lose their job, their home, and all of their family's going to be thrown in jail if they don't do this one thing or they don't complete this task. You have to amp it up. You have to make the stakes big. You've got to make them very visceral. So amp up your story. And last, I recently did a video on sequences, which I'll link right here. But the best shorts I've seen are shorts that could either be sequence 2 or 4 from a full-length feature film. So it's like a segment of a full-length film. Sequence 2 typically is when the protagonist is presented with the choice of whether or not to do something, whether they're going to go on the quest or not, and they wrestle with doing it. Should I do it? Should I not do it? And they ultimately decide they're going to go do the thing. Now, it's a messy ending to the short, but we have a hope of what they're after. We know what they're going to go do. We know okay, they're going to go try to steal the car. They're going to go try to rob the bank. They're going to try to marry the guy or the girl. They're going to go try to do whatever it is. We know what they're going to try to do, so we don't get a clean ending, but we have a pretty good idea of what's going to happen. And it's the same thing with the feature film. At the end of sequence 2 in a feature film, you have an idea of okay, here's what we can expect. They're going to go try to, steal this thing from the alien captors or whoever it is. Sequence 4 in a feature film is usually what leads to the midpoint of the film, and it's typically the biggest defeat. So the character is trying to do this thing, and they're struggling, and they have a loss, and they're at a low point, and then the character chooses to keep going. And that's a great short film because we've seen them get punished, we've seen them get beat up, and they have nothing left to lose, and they're gonna keep going forward. And those are great short films. And these kinds of stories are typically some of the better shorts because they are in fact complete stories. They aren't tidy, they're about one person, they show, they don't tell, and they're amped up with massive stakes, and the protagonist loses, and they choose to press on in spite of everything. Okay, Jake, I get it, but how do you write one? I mean, it seems like it's going to be really different from writing a feature film or anything else. So what do I need to do? Well, actually, it's kind of the same. I mean, it's the same really as any screenplay. I mean, you start with a character, someone who wants something, they're having trouble getting it, they get it or they don't. You got to figure out all those pieces. You flesh out all those required parts of the story. You figure out what is the measurable thing that my protagonist is going to go after. Maybe it's something like if they don't do it, they're going to die, or somebody close to them is going to die. There's a threat of death or destruction or whatever it is. There needs to be high stakes. And then once you figure that out, you just kind of flesh out the rest of the story. So you're not writing yet, okay? You're figuring out the story. Someone wants something badly, they're having trouble getting it. They get it or they don't. They should have trouble getting it. Maybe they get it, maybe they don't. And what gives them trouble along the way? And the trouble that your character is going to face helps you figure out your antagonist and other characters that you may need for your story. Some that are going to hinder your main character, some that might help your main character. And once you have those pieces, then you just kind of start to outline the story. You break the story down into its pieces and beats and make sure you have a solid story from beginning to end. That's what outlines are there for. They're there to make sure you have a solid story. Then you got to figure out, because it's a screenplay, then you got to figure out how to tell it. You figure out you're telling it in the writing usually. Now sometimes you figure it out in an outline, so you might choose to re-outline and move things around. Like, I think this is going to be the best way to tell the story, so you might choose to do it that way before you start writing. But often you figure out the telling in the writing. That means you are still ensuring that everything that is required for your story to make sense is in there. And you get it all in there by the time you get to the end. And just like writing anything else, when you finish a draft, you start revising it. Now, you might revise it to pull out some themes that you want. You might revise it to refine characters and the conflicts and make sure all those are clear or in clear opposition to one another. Maybe you're revising it just to meet some production needs. Like, hey, we can't shoot this scene, so we got to do it this way or put it in this other location. So how can we make it work? And so you start doing that. And that really applies if you're shooting it yourself. And the benefit of writing a short film is you typically can do all of this in a week or two, usually just a week. I mean, compare that to a feature film where you might spend 3 weeks alone just on creating the outline itself, and you're spending a couple of months writing the whole thing. Short films are really good at helping you figure out the whole process, but not spend as much time doing it. So you can kind of learn a little faster. Keep in mind though, it doesn't fully translate to film. So just because you can write a short film doesn't mean you can write a full-length feature film. You start learning some of the tools and how some of the tools work and how to navigate some of that, but it's not always the exact same thing. So just kind of be aware of that. The other thing you want to be aware of is, and this is probably the main thing, is just like any story, you start with character. Always start with a character. What do they want? What do they need? What's going to be good for them? If they get the thing they want, is it going to be good or is it not going to be good? Will they need to change to get it? Should they change to get it? And you start asking all these questions. And these are all the same questions you would ask before writing any story. So in that sense, it's really no different. And while there's no right way, there's no right way to write a short film, there is usually a process that works best. And it's the process I just kind of walked you through. Figure out your character, parts of them that are required for the story. You start outlining the story so you know you actually have a story, because that's usually a problem with a lot of short films. They don't have a story. So you got to make sure you have a story. Then you start writing it, figuring out how you're going to tell the story. Then you revise, because some things won't be working like you want them to. And if you're shooting it yourself, you may have to redo some things or reimagine some things just based on where you're shooting and how much you can afford if it's a budget issue. But that's really it. It's not hard to write a short film. And in fact, writing a short, and subsequently if you do this, shoot it and edit it yourself and show it to others, can be vastly rewarding and fulfilling. Plus, you're going to learn a ton about the writing process. If you want some practice, but you don't want to take several months to write a feature, well, you should try writing a short film, or 3 or 9, and it will help you improve as a writer. Hopefully this has been helpful to you, and if it has, please be sure to like, subscribe, bell, all that. I really do appreciate it. There are some links below that might be helpful to you, so be sure to check those out. And when you go to tell a story, whether it's a pilot, a feature film, or a short film, tell a story that matters. See you later.